Um, Hello everyone. My name is Chirag, and I am based out of Bangalore, India. And Swati, who is the co-presenter, she's from US. She would not be able to join the session. But thanks everyone for joining in. Really great sessions before this. Really good paper presentations. The topic for us today will be cracking the WTP metric, which is the willingness to pay metric, to enhance the pricing framework. So the pricing framework is we will be talking about how we can enhance and optimize the B2B sales process end to end by using reasoning LLMs, Agentic AI, and Langchain framework, and also to optimize the margins that we get. So we'll use a generic scenario where the example in this throughout this paper will be a B2B sales process, business to business, where a company is selling products to another company. How do we understand how much is the willingness to pay for the end customer for the product which you are selling? And how do we understand that using large language models? So I'll walk through the abstract of the paper. We know that Agentic Universe is new. I think last year around March or April timeframe is when I started using agents on top of LLMs. So agents are nothing but some piece of code that allows an LLM to perform an action. By action, I mean it can either go and crawl the internet, or it can go and log into websites and start extracting stuff, etc. And very recently, you would have heard about Operator being launched by OpenAI. I think it's yesterday's news. So Operator is kind of an LLM that will sit inside your browser and it can do activities for you. So that is where Agentic Universe is something that has multiple use cases, and we will be talking about a specific use case to extract the willingness to pay. I spoke about that we'll be using B2B sales as example. And at the end of it, we'll be able to understand a framework where we can extract the willingness to pay of the business to which we are selling our products. There is some critical information from the internet that needs to be extracted in real time and then processed using a language model to understand how well the company is doing, the company to which you are selling your product to. From here on, we'll call that as a business. And the company, your own company from which you are creating those products and selling, we'll be calling that as your company. So we'll be able to understand how do we rank order the businesses and then prioritize them to go for the sales conversations with the highest willingness to pay at the top. And then we can train the sales teams to negotiate a better pricing and optimize the margins going forward. So, willingness to pay when it comes to sales processes, it's a very critical metric and it's also very complex. It is critical because at the point in time when you are selling a product, it becomes important to understand whether the end customer is willing to pay for your product or not. So, think about this as, let's say there are two people who are going to purchase a car. One person might have a higher willingness to pay for the same model as compared to the other person. It's the job of the salesperson to understand which customer will have a higher willingness to pay so that they can maximize their profit. It's complex because it's not easy to determine the willingness to pay. There are multiple factors involved, and we'll talk about that in the coming slides. So all of those factors will need to be analyzed and processed in real time. And there, it is not humanly possible to, in real time, understand all of these factors to uh, create a mental model and then come to a conclusion that person X has a higher willingness to pay than person B. In this paper, we are discussing an approach for B2B sales. It's not a B2C or end customer sale, because when it comes to an end customer, there are multiple more fragments that we'll have to see in order to understand the willingness to pay. So that is even more complicated. When we are selling to businesses, it is still a little easier to understand whether that business is having a willingness to pay or not. The motivation behind this was at times when you are onboarding new customers, there is a lot of research that goes into understanding willingness to pay, and then we lose the critical time to onboard the merchant and start the revenue streams. So that was the motivation, and also you have a large amount of businesses that you can start reaching out to, but which one is the most important at this point in time, which has the highest willingness to pay, is something that is not easy to calculate. So that is where we often end up losing money on the table, and we do not negotiate better. So this was the motivation behind working on this business problem. So let's talk about the methodology that we have used. There are three major pillars on which we are ranking the businesses to which we are selling. All of these metrics will be combined together to create one consolidated score. The first metric that we'll go after is the internal to company rank. So what it means by internal to company rank, let's say you own a business and you already have a list of 100 customers who are onboarded to your company, who have already purchased your products, who are using your products. But then you, let's say, see higher engagement or more product penetration from only a certain set of customers as compared to the others. So in that way, internal to company rank becomes important, because for the already onboarded customers, you would want to understand whether they are well engaged or not. For new businesses, this metric will not be available, of course, because you're targeting a new business altogether for which you do not have any internal data available. So for that, we will not be generating this score. The second most important pillar of this entire methodology is the current financial health. So what do I mean by financial health? Let's say if I talk about Microsoft, we can probably, let's say if you are selling to Microsoft at this point of time, you would want to understand how well they are doing financially. So what you can do is go to Google Finance, search for Microsoft, and then there is a ton of information that showcases here. So first, there are a couple of news items, Meta platforms, Microsoft headline parade, etc. You have to go through all of these to understand what is happening with this business. Then majorly you will have to understand all of these metrics that we see. So revenue, operating expense, net income, profit margin, etc. And then we have the balance sheet analysis that you have to do. And then we have the cash flow statements as well. And this does not have to be in one given snapshot in time. So this data is for September 2024, but you would also have to go historically and look at how the metrics have changed over time for Microsoft. And using all of this, we'll be able to come to a conclusion that how well financially healthy is Microsoft at this point of time with the latest data that has been released by the company. So we got to understand that financial health will come in through reading through all of these metrics and creating your own understanding about the company by looking at or giving more weightage to certain parameters as compared to others, and then also going through some news articles where you can understand what are the sentiments ongoing about this business in the market. So that is where financial health is something which depends on individual to individual. And if two persons are analyzing Microsoft data together, both of them might have different opinion about the company. We'll understand how we can fetch financial health in real time without spending time at all on Google Finance and going through all of the material that is available. And we also have to remember that this is the sales representatives who are doing this activity, and they may not have training in understanding the financial metrics. So even though they will get the information about operating expenses and EBITDA, etc., but they may not be able to make sense out of it. And then the third pillar is the market and investor sentiments. What is the current ongoing sentiment about the business? Whether, let's say, just taking it as an example, if there is a huge tax implication that has come in for Microsoft, it is a very negative sentiment indicator, and it may reflect on the willingness to pay as well. We look at how this factor is also important, not as important as the current financial health or your internal to company rank, but it is a third pillar that we definitely will have to look at. So I'm going to start talking about the approach. The first thing is we have to fetch the data. For internal to company ranking, this is still internal data that needs to be fetched from your own internal databases. Usually we look at how well transactionally engaged the business is for the ones that are already onboarded. And we will look at the product penetration, whether they have service requests, they come back for service requests, they have call center conversations going on about understanding of the new products, etc. So there are a couple of parameters that we'll talk about, and this data is still accessible because it is within your own company. For financial health, it depends on the merchant or the business that you are analyzing. So every time there is a business that you are analyzing, whether it's a already onboarded business or a new business, you will always have to go back to finance providers like Google Finance or Yahoo Finance and then start extracting the data from it. You might have to copy paste that into an Excel sheet or take a data dump into an Excel sheet and start looking at the different parameters. So this data is a little difficult to get. Also, the most reliable source is for the companies who have who have publicly released their financial statements or who are publicly listed companies. The companies which are not publicly listed are not a part of this approach because their financial health data, although available on certain websites like Crunchbase, etc., it's not a very reliable data. So we will only be looking at the companies that are listed. And then how do we get the market sentiment ranking? So this can be obtained from either news articles, going and searching on Google and then trying to understand what kind of sentiments are ongoing, let's say customer reviews, etc. So that data also depends on individual to individual, and there may be different approach to extract that data. So how do large language models come into picture? So what we have designed as a backend POC is we can use the concept of agents to automatically fetch the data from Google Finance API. So for example, you just input the name of the business that you want to search the information for. There is a specially designed prompt in the backend that says that calls an agent. That agent will take the name of the business as an input and go to Google Finance API. From there, it will bring in the entire list of financial metrics over the past quarters or years, and then it will come take it back as a placeholder. Now, what we do is we will pass this to another prompt that is created to call an LLM with the given information that the agent has brought in. So this is a concept. This is where the concept of Langchain comes into picture, where you are connecting different prompts together. Once the data is brought in, which is a very huge JSON file format, which contains all of the parameters, it is then passed on to a reasoning language model, and the prompt is designed in such a way that it is the language model is asked to understand and create a summary of what can we infer from all of these metrics taken together. And then we can also provide a few short learning with examples saying that if operating expense is going down, it means that it is a positive indicator. If revenue goes up, then again it is a positive indicator. So that is how we can train the prompt and ask the model to summarize this. Although reasoning LLMs have capabilities to understand these itself, but still it's always better to provide some examples to for the model to learn. Similarly, we can uh, call the news provider API, so news.io, and there are a couple of other websites which have API calling facility. So we can use agents to do that API call, get the required information, and then pass it into another LLM to understand what is going on in the backend. Now what happens is you get the financial health score from external data, you get the market sentiment from external data, and you have the internal to company performance score. We need to combine all of these things together. How do we do that? Because financial health may be having a different weightage as compared to, let's say, market sentiment. So certain businesses might have in general negative sentiment, but still they are financially very healthy. And there may be cases where the internal to your own company performance is really good, but the financial health is poor. So that is where we have to combine these three scores together and generate one single score, so that you can start looking at all of the businesses and rank order them in the prioritization of sales conversations. So the first example, let's say if the business is having a high financial health and low internal to company performance, it means that business is doing deals with other companies similar to yours. So they are purchasing similar products from other companies as well, because even though their financial health is good and their sales are going up, but they are not bringing that money to your company. So this is an indicator that you can start having those prioritized sales conversations and negotiate better with these businesses because they have good financial health. The second case is where the internal to company performance is very good, but then the financial health score is low. And there are a lot of businesses like this. So it would indicate that there is a risk factor coming in, and we have to prepare for it. Either increase the buffer that we keep with the business, or you start increasing the pricing so that you are covered even if the company fails. And then the third, the market sentiment score, we will understand the futuristic engagement. So as I was saying, the example for tax implications, it would definitely mean that in future, there may be some decrease in the business activity from that particular customer that you have. Now, how do we combine all of these things together? So the willingness to pay has to come in as one specific single score. And there is an equation that we have created, as you can see here. The equation has been generated using our own understanding of historical data, where we saw that financial health at that given point of time and looked at in the format of a trend. Let's say the September 2024 results compared with the previous 2 or 3 quarters is the most important indicator of willingness to pay, because that is where we know that the sales are coming in and the business is doing really good. The second is internal to company performance score. So that is, it's treated as second, because even though the business is not doing good with your own company, but it does not mean that it's not a healthy business, and you can still go ahead and have those conversations. And lastly, market sentiment score is very volatile because it depends on the sentiments or news articles that are ongoing, and there may be biases coming in from those news articles. So in order to avoid that and still consider the score, we have ranked it or weighted it as the lowest. So as you can see, the willingness to pay will then turn out to be a financial health score, which is on a scale of 1 to 10 multiplied by 65%. Internal to company score, which is again on the same scale, taken as 25% weightage, and 10% weightage from the market sentiment score. This one single score will have a 360-degree overview of the business's health, both internally as well as externally. Internally, I mean how well the business is engaged already with your company, and externally, the financial health and market sentiments that are ongoing. So let's talk about a few use cases here. Why willingness to pay score is important, and we have now converted everything to a score. So you can see that earlier it was all textual data. You read through the financial statements and then create your own understanding and write a summary about it. But now that textual data is again converted to a numeric data, and numeric data becomes easier to track over a period of time. So you can see how the willingness to pay of a business is changing over a past few quarters, and then you can make an understanding. So this becomes a critical metric for the risk teams. So risk teams internal to your company, they will have to look at any significant drop in financial or sentiment health, and this would indicate upcoming challenges in the business performance. You can start mitigating those risks in advance. The sales teams could use this score to prioritize customer conversations. So we know that there are hundreds of leads that the sales teams get. How do you know which business is having the highest willingness to pay and they are willing to pay more as compared to other businesses? So that is where the score becomes important, and you can start looking at the ones which have a higher willingness to pay as of today. And time becomes a very critical metric here. It depends on the current financial statement release and the current sentiments that are ongoing in the market. So timing of generating the WTP score becomes important. Pricing teams can determine what are the price points for the product that work best. So if there are a lot of customers who are scored low in, let's say, one particular industry and a region, if you plot it on, let's say, a map, then you will be able to understand that these regions are where the price perception is very high of our products. And this would indicate that you have to optimize the pricing as which would cater to the audience that you're dealing with in that region and the industry. And lastly, leadership teams will have to assess which are the markets which are healthy. So if you plot, let's say, the financial health score on a regional map, you will be able to understand where are the opportunities or pockets of margin lying, and then you can start looking at how do you optimize those regions further going forward. Now let's come to the score generation. Before going into these details, there is a working POC that we had built and we had hosted it externally, but then the access is limited. So I'm going to showcase that here. Uh, this is where I have searched for the data for Microsoft, and in real time, the backend prompt that we had written, it goes to Google Finance, calls in the API, brings in the entire data at one place, starts summarizing it using another prompt, and then starts creating scoring as well on top of that prompt. So we can see that this is the summary that has been generated for, I searched for Microsoft in this POC. So this is the summary. We have the financial rating on 10, so it is rated 9 on 10. This is the sentiment rating, which is 8 on 10. This is the stock performance data, average stock price per month for the past 12 months. So this data that you see here is generated using the language model. So it is able to understand that analyzing the trends, there was a noticeable volatility, which is definitely there. The stock price was low and then it started to dip and things like that. So this is all generated data and it completely follows the trend, and there are no hallucinations coming in because we are taking the data from Google Finance. Then it summarizes the sentiments that are ongoing among investors and shareholders. This is based on the news article data that we see specifically on Google Finance, but then there are other areas from which we can pull those information. So all looks good here. There is a focus towards areas like Azure and AI, which we already know about. This is a quick overview of the kind of news articles that are going. So let's say CEO Satya Nadella comments on financing the strategic AI projects despite challenges, etc. And then these are the news articles. If someone is interested in looking at what are the articles, and this is where we can go. So we can see that this article is coming directly from what we saw on Google Finance. So this is Meta platforms, this is Microsoft, etc. And this is what is also being pulled in real time. So if you run this algorithm today, you will get today's scores generated. This is the financial health of the company. So all of this is being pulled from Google Finance. So at the POC stage, this is just summarizing what is going on with these metrics. Now, if the end user is a salesperson, they will be able to understand that earnings per share increase means that it is indicating profitable operations, which is a very important metric to understand. Now, this is again all generated data based on the data, the JSON file that we have passed on into the reasoning LLM. What does it mean by free cash flow increase? It means providing more liquidity for strategic initiatives. So this is where any end user can come and understand what do these metrics mean and whether this is a good indicator or not. And then we have the balance sheet analysis. And lastly, there is another prompt that we wrote, which will take as input all of these outputs that have been generated from previous prompts and then create a 1 or 2 liner summary. So it says that Microsoft health is robust, marked by significant revenue growth, controlled expense management, and strong profitability. By reading this one single line, any person can understand what is the financial health of this business as of today. Okay, so let's speak about how do we generate this score. The first thing is internal to company score. So as I was speaking, there the most important data becomes your transactions history, the how well the business has already been associated, and there is a metric that we used called RFM, which is recency, frequency, and monitoring. So you can think about this as how recent the business has done transaction with your company, how frequently does the business do transactions with the company, and what is the monetary value of those transactions. So all these three combined together will give us an RFM score that indicates very well the transactions history that the merchant or the business has with your company. Then we have call center requests, not just the number of requests, but what kind of call center requests are coming in. This indicates that the merchant is actively involved with your company, and then they are having conversations with the sales teams and the call center teams about new products, etc. And then, of course, the product penetration. So let's say your company has 25 different products. How many of those 25 products has this business already purchased from you? So all these three combined together will help us to understand the internal to company score. This is where we speak about how do we generate the financial health score. So let's say the end user comes and searches the name of the business. This name of the business is feeded into a pre-created prompt. That prompt is like based on the name of the company, and the name is the placeholder which the end user puts into the search. uh, Call the agent to go to Google Finance and pull in the information about the financial health. And then when that data comes in, then so the AI agent will call SERP API. So there is an agent that is in place here. SERP API is used to search anything on Google. So the agent will call the SERP API, and from Google it will retrieve the ticker symbol of the company. That ticker symbol is then being passed to Google Finance API, and then from that it will search for the financial metrics and the news articles that are ongoing. Then there is a JSON format file which is received, which is again feeded into another prompt, which says that using this data, you create an understanding about the performance of the company, and that understanding or the summary that it creates is passed on to again another prompt. There are 3 or 4 different prompts linked together, and the last prompt will generate the score that we saw earlier in the example. Market sentiment is also done in the similar way, where instead of finding the ticker symbol, you search for the news articles that are ongoing about the company on SERP API and ask the LLM to generate a sentiment score based on what kind of news articles are being talked about. So there are a couple of cost implications. The major cost is incurred from the usage of LLMs, because there are two inputs that there are two things which will add up to the cost. One is the prompts that we pass. So there are a couple of different prompts, and the prompts are not direct and straightforward. These are very complex prompts. So it adds on to the total number of tokens generated. The second is Google Finance data that we receive is very huge. So there is a lot of data that is received and then it starts adding on to the tokens. So this is another cost implication that we have to take care of. Secondly, there are charges from API providers. So as of now, let's say Google Finance, if you are calling it on for 2,000 or 3,000 businesses, then there are cost implications from the API calls as well. There are news vendors which also provide you all of the information, but then they will charge for every API call. So the API also incurs some costs. And then lastly, the data that is retrieved. So a lot of times your end users or the sales teams will come and ask that we need to understand how this data is generated. So you will have to store the summary and the metrics and everything together at one place, which adds up to the storage and maintenance of this data. So a quick example, and then I'll pause for questions. This is where the first column that you see, it is a dummy data. I have used the Microsoft dummy data to, let's say, it is not that well engaged with your company. So we have rated it 5 on 10. The financial performance and market sentiment is something that I retrieved from the POC. So it is 8 on 10 and 7 on 10. Now, based on the equation that we saw above, the total overall score for Microsoft, if it is not that much engaged with your company, becomes 7.15. Whereas if let's say Microsoft is a good customer for your company, the internal score is 9 on 10, then the score increases to 8.15. Similarly, for Intel, we are able to see when we go to Google Finance that the financial health is not that great. So it has rated it 4 on 10 and the market sentiment is 5 on 10. Now here, it would not matter whether it is very well engaged with your company. Let's say if the score is 9 on 10, still the overall WTP will be 5.35, which is lower as compared to Microsoft. Couple of limitations. Probably, I think we can skip this section in the interest of time, and then there are scope of improvements, and then the conclusion. So I'll stop here at the conclusion, and please let me know if there are any questions.